Hey, hi, hello. Well, we are going to be talking about this thing that's called homoglyph-based attacks for a little while. Um, just, I'd love to go through some notes before we get started so we understand how the presentation is going to work. First of all, there's a lot of things that could be said about this, right? But I'm going to try to be like accessible rather than precise. So I'm going to make some simplify the statements, let's say. But if you want the precise data, you will have it here. So I'm going to put the references. So if you want to check out the papers that I'm going to be talking about, etc., you just need to make a note, and I'll give you the bibliography at the end so that you can actually go and check. Now, another thing I will do is I will give you pink boxes, like here. So at the end of each section, we will see a pink box. That means a message to remember, something to take out of the presentation. And at the end, we will gather those messages and build like a nice summary with the pink boxes that we will find throughout the presentation. Then, having said that, we are ready to get started. And there's just a very short point. Who is this person? What I did, basically, I took my CV and I put all of the words in our word cloud, and this is just to explain who I am. So basically what I do is like development, but I also do research, language models. I also work with a different thing that's called knowledge graphs, but it's not the topic for today. What I think is interesting is that this presentation is based on this paper, so you can find it on arXiv, and it's an interesting read, I promise. But here we will be talking a little bit about the general view of this thing. So first of all, what are homoglyphs? Maybe I imagine that some of you will already know this thing, but just so that everybody's on the same page, if I take something like different A's, and now I ask you, which is the one that you get when you press A on your keyboard, which one do you think it is? First one? Third one, okay, second one, third one, okay, fourth, fifth. Okay, well, I see that most people are correct. Yes, the second one is the one that we would be getting. The important thing to notice here is just that they have different numbers, right? They have different Unicode encodings. That's what we call a homoglyph. Things that seem identical, but actually when we represent them with numbers, they are different, right? So that's not something that's new. That existed already. There's past applications. So I'll just give you like a short historical overview of this thing. Basically, URL attacks, you probably know this, right? I send you an SMS. It looks like this, you click, oh, you're hacked. Well, it doesn't work anymore because now it would get transformed into this. This is a thing that's called punicode. But another thing that you can try to do is hiding information. There's a proper name for that. It's called stenography. Again, the idea is very simple, right? Like, for example, if the first A in this text, it's this thing, you should do this thing, so only you know that this secret bit of data is true. Very good. That's the whole idea of the section. Homoglyphs, they are characters that we don't, as humans, we can't really discern. That's the idea. Very good. So now let's dive a little bit deeper and start talking about how we can detect when something has been written by, for example, ChatGPT. Okay, what are the detectors of generated text and how do they work? So I'd say there's three main types. I'm going to talk first about classifiers. Classifiers, simple models. Basically, I'm going to have some text, I give this to a model, and the model is going to extract some, well, you can do it in different ways, but for example, you could think that you could try to extract like some statistical measures about the text, and then I use that to, for example, generate an embedding. So you could do this with BERT-like models, right? So generate an embedding, that means generate a vector, a set of numbers. For example, here I have a vector with just two numbers, and if you try to plot this, well, it would be a point in space, right? So here you can see that I have a red region of things and a blue region of things, and they are different. If my point lands on the red region, that means it's AI generated. The model is telling me, okay, this is not human. Very good. That's classifiers. Now, Let's talk about perplexity-based detectors, okay? We need to understand how LLMs work, but I'll just give you a very short point on that, really super short. For the purposes of this presentation, they are just statistical models that complete sentences. Okay, so as a hobby, I like to collect something. I give this to an LLM, and what I'm gonna get is a probability distribution. So as a hobby, I like to collect things with 30% probability, books with 21% probability, etc. And what I do now is I pick one of the top choices. So for example, I can say, oh, well, I'm gonna choose books here. So I choose books and I complete the sentence, right? Very, very easy. And this has been AI generated because it's the output of the model that's guiding the generation. Now, the thing is, if, for example, I write something that comes to my mind, like bracelets, and we go back to the probability distribution, where is bracelets? Well, maybe it's down here, 0.01%, so very unlikely, right? So then the idea here is that books had high probability, bracelets had a low probability. That means that perplexity, it's just another way of calling this thing, will be a guide for us to tell whether something has been AI generated or human. Very simple. Of course, this is a little bit more complicated in reality, but the general idea is just this thing about perplexity. Now we repeat this thing for the whole text and we get a prediction. Very good. Now, the last of the mechanisms is a thing that we call watermarks. And this has been on the news for like a little bit of time now because maybe you've seen things like this. OpenAI has a watermark. How can we check if something has been generated by ChatGPT? I'll give you the idea. So we have our probability distribution like before, but now I'm not going to choose any of the words. I'm going to give you a rule. For example, pick the nth word, and how do you choose n? You choose the number of letters in the previous word. So, as a hobby, I like to collect, that has 7 letters. I go to my probability distribution and I start counting. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Oh, okay, very good. It's plants, right? So I write plants. And I can't write anything else. I have to write plants, right? I have a secret watermark, but the completions that I generate are not visible, right? So that's the whole idea of watermarks. You wouldn't be able to tell it's here, but actually, yes, it is. And if we repeat this thing for all of the words, you can almost like for certain guarantee that a text has been generated using AI. If you see that most of the words actually abide by this rule, that means AI for sure. So that's the general idea of how the detection of AI-generated texts work. I'd say there's different techniques, but all of them try to somehow like understand the text, do some things with the text, and try to extract a conclusion. Now, let's talk about homoglyph-based attacks. And for this thing, I actually wanted to show you how we can just evade the detectors with a very short demo. I have it here. It's just a space in Hugging Face. I have this is like a generated text, right? Like this is something that an AI system wrote. Now I submit it here. I get like a different version with homoglyphs. And first, let me copy the original version. So this is AI. It doesn't have any sort of modifications. And I'm going to check if it's AI or not, right? Like I just put it here. Oh, yeah, okay, it's AI. Now, homoglyphs, 5%. I just replaced 5%, right? I go here, very good, paste, check. And what do I get? Human in every single detector. So yeah, it's very effective, right? But maybe it would be interesting to understand why it works exactly, because it doesn't affect all of the detectors in the same way. They actually have different behaviors when they are faced with homoglyphs. So let's look a little bit more into the technical details. How are the different detectors affected by this thing? Well, first of all, classifiers. Do you remember the first type of system? Well, what we get if we try to represent the homoglyph attacked text, you will have this distribution here. So you remember those were AI-generated texts. these are human texts, but now those are the same texts, but when we apply homoglyphs. And we can see two very interesting things. The first thing is, well, they are in a completely different region, right? So if I have a system that classifies based on this thing, I wouldn't really be able to classify this thing correctly, right? Like it's totally separate. Now, the second thing is that the points here, you can see that they are much more mixed. So they are harder to separate. Even if I retrained my classifier with those texts, it would still be very hard for the system to know if something is human or not, because you can see that there's purple points here, there's some green points here. Well, you don't see it very well because they are overshadowed by the other ones, but like we have a mixed representation. So different region of space, more mixed. That means it's super hard for detectors to actually work with these types of text. So they get super confused here. Now, perplexity-based detectors, how are they affected? Well, the idea is very simple, right? Like we had this phrase before, as a hobby I like to collect books, but you know, books had like a certain probability, etc. But now if I have this phrase, as a hobby, of course, my probability distribution is going to look completely different. What's the probability of nothing? Nothing. So it's going to look human just because the detector doesn't understand what's here. Now, yes, this fails as well. Watermarks. How does it change with watermarks? Very simple again. We had a rule. Remember, the rule was the number of letters in the previous word means that you will go to the probability distribution, etc. Okay, so now we could say, oh, well, I don't understand what this is, so maybe this weird characters is a space. So 5 letters, right? What's the next word? Okay, we go to the probability distribution. We expect to see postcards. Oh, it's postcards, but I'm seeing plants. That means that I'm not following the rule. That means it's human. So all of the 3 systems, they are affected in different ways, but all of the mechanisms exploit this idea of confusion. I don't understand what's here, so I bypass you. Now the question is, it looks like this would be effective, but how much? What are the numbers here? Is it effective in, I don't know, 50% of the cases, 60, 70? Well, I'll tell you now. So what I was doing here, basically, like I tried this technique on a data set of 2,000 texts. So 1,000 are human, 1,000 are AI, and well, I replaced with different replacement levels and tested this on a lot of detectors, and then just looked at what are the percentages of evasion, right? You have the data in the paper if you want to look at this later, but the idea here, I'm going to give you the results, but I'm going to go bit by bit. First, this is the confusion matrix of one of the detectors. So here what you can see is that human texts are mostly classified as human, right? Like out of 1,980 are correctly classified. And also generated texts, they are very well classified as well, 963, so that's very good, right? Now, what happens when I apply a homoglyph-based attack? That's a strong result, right? 0, like absolutely 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. Everything is classified as human. That's a very strong result. Now, that's one of the systems, but, yeah, and here you can see that originally we had a very good performance, then it completely drops. Can we say that this is the case in general? Well, I tested that on the other systems as well, and you can see that originally some of them were very good, not all of them, right? Like some of the systems are not like very good to start with, but some of them are very performant here. Now, what are the general results? Do I have to say anything? No. Like, it's very effective, right? All of the systems in general are ineffective when we apply homoglyph-based attacks. So that's a very strong result. And now we can talk about the implications of this. You know it very well. I'm just gonna give you like some ideas here, etc., etc. Yes. It's dangerous, and also I'd say that one of the things that makes it perhaps more concerning is that there's an increased risk because this is a very simple technique. You don't need a GPU or a lot of time. No, you just replace some characters and that's it. Super low entry barrier for anyone. So like that means increased risk, right? And in general, I think that this adds to the fact that AI-generated detectors are unreliable in general. So yeah, it's well, it's I would say it's a threat that users can use right now. Now the question becomes, can we do something about it? What can we do? And if I ask you about it, of course, I imagine that you would probably tell me, oh, well, just check if there's homoglyphs in your text, right? You just check and that's it. Well, of course. I mean, we can simply try to have a system that, you know, I take a human text and if it's all right, it's gonna pass the text to a detector. Very good. That's a human text, nothing weird here. If it's an AI text, I'm gonna give the text to the homoglyph detector. Well, sorry, that was, the alarm should be here, right? It's AI, I raise my alarm. But if it's a homoglyph attacked text, I raise an alarm. I don't even go to the detector because I know that's gonna fail for sure, but I raise an alarm before that. Very good. Now the problem is that it doesn't really work in the general case. Why doesn't it work? Well, I'll give you one example. So let's say you have this text, scientific article. What happens here? Well, you have homoglyphs. Like in the natural discourse of the text, you have homoglyphs, and it could get more complicated. You can have text with mixed languages, etc. So if you want to build a general purpose detector, just checking for the characters is not enough. So how can we solve this? What can we do here? Well, maybe what we could try to do is to get a little bit smarter and start looking at the differences in likelihoods per token. So here you can see that, and I'm going to go so I can point at things here. So here you can see that when we attack a text, we have a different distribution in the probabilities of each of the tokens, right? When I don't attack the text, they are generally in this region, but when I attack them, they are in this region. In other words, this is what we have. We have a different distribution, right? Very good. Now, can we maybe use this? Like just like, you know, to say that if something is like, well, has like a lower level here, it's like a homoglyph attack. Again, it's not so easy. It's not so easy. I'll tell you why. So let's say US Constitution. This is a text that has very, very low perplexity. That means that I'm going to have like a specific number here, right? But then I start taking other texts, random things. And the thing is that the perplexity in different texts will vary a lot. Like, and you are not going to be able to say, oh, there's homoglyphs here, there's an attack based on homoglyphs here just because my perplexity is higher. That doesn't really work. So again, maybe we need to still get a little bit smarter, and I'll give you what comes to my mind. So this is not like, so I haven't comprehensively tested this thing. This is just, so I'm working on this part right now, right? But I'll give you an idea. Maybe what we can try to do is we can try to normalize the text. When I say normalize, I mean I take a text with homoglyphs, rewrite it into Latin, right? So we normalize the text, and if we look at the ratio of change, that is, or at least I think that should be enough. What's going to happen here? The US Constitution, well, it's still the same, right? Because we don't need to rewrite anything, perfect. But if we have an attacked text, then the ratio is actually going to be significant. So we are going to be able to detect this thing. I'll give you a demo. Let's go back here. Okay, so here we have a system that I think will show you some very interesting examples. First, we have a text here that doesn't have anything weird. Let me submit it. Yeah, so it doesn't have anything weird, right? There's no homoglyphs, so it's all good. Perfect. Now, I attack the text. Oh, now there's homoglyphs. The alarm gets triggered. Great. Now, well, this would be, again, like a little bit the same example, right? Let me just go here. no homoglyphs, all good, perfect. We attack with homoglyphs. We evaluate this with GPT-2. And what's the result? Oh, the alarm should get triggered. Let's just give it a sec. Ba-ba-bum. Yeah, here it is. Alarm triggered. Very good. Now, let's look at, for example, a scientific article, right, which naturally contains characters. We run this through the model. And now when we get our result, you should be able to see that the ratio is not enough. So very good. It seems to work. Again, like if we do this thing, for example, on a Greek text, it would give you that it's all good. Now, I'll give you perhaps the most interesting example, which is that here you have a text in, like with some words in Spanish. So there's homoglyphs here. It's a dangerous text, but it's all good again because the ratio is not enough. Now, the question is, what happens if I were to attack this text? So what happens if I put extra homoglyphs in this text and then I measure? Well, you could say, oh, maybe the detector will get confused here, you know, because like I have some homoglyphs already, so if I put more homoglyphs, maybe it's not going to work. Well, let's check it out. It still works. So even if I attack the text, here I replaced 5% of the characters, it still works. And I wouldn't be able to say that this is the case in general for all of the cases because I haven't been able to have the time to test this like on 2,000 examples as before, but I'll try to do it, maybe publish a paper. There's, of course, other techniques that maybe you could consider trying, but I think this is perhaps the easiest and most reliable way that I could come up with. So, very interesting, yet we have to keep working on that. And let's just recap. What did we learn here? What did we just see today? Well, first we saw that homoglyphs are those characters that we can't really discern, right? Like they look the same, so us humans wouldn't be able to tell. But well, when we give them to the detectors of text, the text just is not recognizable anymore, so the different detectors are very confused and they can't detect the text. Now, this is highly effective. We saw that it's super effective. And also there's a lower access barrier, so this is an increased risk, right? People can use it very easily. AI-generated text detectors are very unreliable, but we need to keep working to make them better. I'd say that's my key message. We need to keep improving and making things better. And talking about improvement, well, I have a feedback form with a QR code here. And if you could give me some feedback, I would really appreciate that. Also, as an incentive for everyone, if you want to get the bibliography, it's at the end of the form. So you open the form, you submit, etc., and then you have the bibliography, where you have the papers, you have related work, you have also like this paper I was talking about, loads of content. If you're interested, I think this will be very interesting for you. So thanks a lot. And now if you have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer.
Thank you so much. Let's give him a round of applause, please. And I see a question in front.
Thank you very much for the talk. It was very interesting. My question is, how about if you generate the text directly on an AI with a lot of homoglyphs? Is the AI still detecting the watermark? The watermark is still working?
So you mean like you would generate the text?
I generate the text on AI. I say, okay, generate me text, but replace letters with some homoglyphs.
So, I mean, if I understood your question, it would already avoid the detectors of generated text because that text would not look human. You know, like it depends on the system. But for example, if you're using a perplexity-based detector, which is the most common system, it would evade that type of detector and probably classifiers depending on the training as well.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
So we have a lot of questions. One here.
Okay, great presentation, by the way. I was wondering, does this attack work on punctuation marks too? Punctuation symbols like exclamation, question mark, commas. I know there's 2 or 3 types of commas, upper commas. I don't know how to say it in English.
So let me see if I understood. So you're asking if I change some of the punctuation marks, does it still work?
Yes, that's what I'm asking.
Oh, that's a very good question. Well, I didn't test it with punctuation marks. I tested it with letters. So, you know, I replaced the Latin A by Russian A or things like that. But with punctuation marks, it should still work because the same principles apply. You know, like the perplexity just goes higher. So like it would work with that. Also with watermarks, it should work as well. Classifiers very likely as well to work. So yes. Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
One more question in the back, in the middle.
Thank you very much for the talk. It was actually very interesting research. I was wondering, because you mentioned this, you know, historically there were already attacks that use homoglyphs, right, with the URLs. And one of the methods that were used initially before even the browsers were unpacking the Unicode was to essentially mark as potentially dangerous mixed content. Of course, you mentioned that, of course, in some text, you already have homoglyphs, right, in scientific papers and so on. However, it's very unusual to have this as like a middle of the word, right? It's like you have words which contain mixed characters from different sort of char sets, right? And I wonder if this wouldn't be like a very simple check to say, okay, if you have words which contains mixed characters, then this is already something that looks very strange.
Well, to be honest, I was thinking about that thing a lot before actually going and writing the alarm, etc. The thing is that I don't think that assumption is really generalizable in general. So for example, if we go back to the example of the math paper, many times you actually use homoglyphs in the middle of words. So for example, you would say an alpha whatever, and it's actually a word per se. Or it's true that, like, I think in many cases that could be the solution. And maybe I didn't make it clear enough here, but my point here is rather, if you don't see homoglyphs to start with, you shouldn't go and actually check for the perplexity, blah, 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 blah. That's your first check. It's what the alarm is doing, right? So first, if there's no homoglyphs, that like you just don't need to check for anything. Then what you could do is maybe go to this extra step of, well, are the homoglyphs just like, I don't know, like separate or like in middle of words that could look like natural words, but then there's a homoglyph. Maybe you could check for that. However, it's true that then you would maybe need to define what's the notion of a normal word. Maybe you would need like dictionaries. I prefer this technique also because like it's just based on perplexity. So you run your text through the model, you extract the measure, and it just gives you a number, whatever the text is. But I agree that this thing could work in many cases. In 100% of the cases, I'm not sure. You know, I think there's like some corner cases where maybe that wouldn't be applicable and then your detector could actually fail. But I hope that answers the question.
Thank you very much.
Let's take just one more question and then a quick 5-minute break.
Thank you very much for the presentation, very interesting. Quick question, is this type of attack could be used as, we know from history has been used before, but this could be used as, I don't know, standalone or more part of more sophisticated controls, more complex ones, like only a part of the attack?
So you mean like the attack, if it could be
based
like
only this type of homoglyph, or this could be only a part and use other techniques?
Yeah, and
more
actually
to add more, you know, complexity and more to be more hard to be detected.
Yeah, that's a very good question. Yes, like it can definitely be combined with other techniques, right? Like so for example, paraphrasing is another technique to evade the detectors of generated text, and you could definitely combine that with other systems. The reason why maybe you, oh, well, sorry, oh, you can see my screen, sorry. Well, I wanted to show you the table from before where we were seeing that it was like 0, 0, here it is, right? So the reason why maybe it's not so interesting to do it, it's because like it already evades all of the detectors. Of course you can put it on top of other techniques, but does it really make sense? I'm not so sure, but it's possible to do that. And well, just to conclude, I see that there's other questions out here. So like, feel free to just come talk to me. I'm more than happy to answer any questions, or on LinkedIn as well, you can message me. So very happy to speak today.
Thank
Thanks
you
a lot.
so much.